everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, Senior VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, joined this afternoon by our president, Matt Boisvert. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel. Good
How's
to
it
see
going?
you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Yeah. I have two warnings that I have to give at the top of this show. The first one is that Rebecca and I have been stressed out all day because the window wipers or washers are here. We are in a 20-story building. We're on the 7th floor. And what is it, like twice a year the window washers come? And you could not pay me enough to do this job because they're suspended by ropes and they just have like these, what are they called? Like suction cups. Yeah. And they slam them on the window and then they wash the window and then they move over. But it's like a whole kerfuffle going on in our office. So I'm very hopeful. I think they're on the 12th floor. I'm very hopeful that we can finish this podcast without that happening.
Yeah, at first we thought there was something happening where birds were just flying into the windows.
Yeah, that sound is scary.
Sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just the window washers.
Yeah. So that is kind of a thing. And the other thing, which I did not tell Z, but my computer's at 18% charged. Now it's plugged in. So it should be, it's already at 23. It's okay. But I'm just saying, had I said that to Z before we started, she would have been in a panic. She would have UPS'd a extension cord here. So that she's chatting like, what is wrong with you? So those are the two things today, window washing and 18%. But I do have some exciting things to tell you, Matt.
Okay.
On this Thursday, I get to do a webinar with Wartburg College. Lindsay, Grace, and Courtney from that campus are going to join me, and they're going to talk about how they've built this very cohesive academics and student success program for retention and student success. So if you are watching, Bailey has put up a QR code for you. That link I cannot read to you because it's too long. If you're just listening, you're going to have to, I don't even know how to tell you.
Go to LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, go to Ferris Resources, follow Ferris Resources, but also you'll see one of our most recent posts is about this webinar.
Okay, awesome.
Huge response. I mean, they've just done incredible work. So it's going to be really
incredible work.
For you to talk through that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I always say this is true about Dave, who's our guest today, and about Wartburg. It's just so nice to talk to people about their experience because there's no like gimme questions, right? Like everything you ask, they're like, oh yeah, I know about that because that was my life, or I did this thing or whatever. So It's going to be really incredible. I'm excited about it. Do you have anything on the list to chit chat about?
Not really. No.
Okay. Well, this is our 6th season, which is crazy town.
It is.
Next week, or May 5th will be our last episode of this season. So that's episode, I think, 15, which is pretty incredible. And then we take off for the summer, and then we will be back in the fall. So pretty hard to believe that we are already at this point of the semester.
Yeah, so we'll dive into the book behind me here.
Mm-hmm.
David Brooks, How to Know a Person. It really is a great book. And so
I don't think we've picked a book before that has had this much appreciation, not only from our team, but from our partners and our listeners. So I think it was a really good choice. I think if you're looking for summer reading, it's a really good one. It just relates so closely to what we do. So I love that. Okay, if you don't have anything else, you know what it's time for. State of the Union. Trey made that little.
I know, I was just thinking about Trey. Yeah.
So years ago, when I started talking about State of the Union, I think it was like during COVID, and it was like the State of the Union was always a thing every week, right? Something was different. So he made that for us so we can talk about the State of the Union. Okay, here's my list for you today of articles that I have read. The first one is just a reminder, you guys, that there's an executive order 1427-9, which is titled Reforming Accreditation to Strengthen Higher Education. It's like 151 pages. You know how they do these executive orders, especially through about higher education, which is they publish them and they invite public comments. We just finished the first public comment of this. Next month, they're going to do another one. They're going to take all of those comments and, sometimes they incorporate them and sometimes they don't. But so nothing is final about this document, but it's interesting to see all of the proposals. Were you going to say something about that?
Oh, it just reminds me of FAFSA, like they opened it up for public comment and then they're like,
yeah, no, we don't like your attitude. We're going to do it anyway. It's turned out fine 3 years later. It's going great 3 years later. Yeah. Okay, but there is a 9-page summary of the proposed changes, which I have read all of it. It's real boring. But the things that I want to point out are like their big headings are around accreditation, reducing regulatory burdens. So making sure that you don't have serious restrictions on institutions changing accreditors, having more than one accreditor. There's just a lot of like how we're going to finesse and finagle that so that we feel good about our accreditation, I guess. There's a whole section on accreditor integrity. There's some things in here about making sure that you presume that the credits that a student earns can transfer as core credits, not just elective credits, which I appreciate. Things about competition between people who are companies that are doing accreditation, some really important student outcomes where they are saying at the program level, we want to understand what your student outcomes are, which I think is going to be really interesting for our clients. So many of our schools outsource that work to us. So as these things kind of develop, if you need help with your student outcomes, let us talk to you about it. Let's see. And then the only other thing that I found buried in here, which is just weird, I don't really understand it, which is they're going to update to define and use the term institution instead of institution of higher education. Why is that? It's just too long. They're like, it's fine.
I guess so,
whatever. We don't have time for that. Okay. So I will keep you posted on what happens with that. But if you have some public comment that you'd like to make, you can look that up. It's on the governmental website and you can say whatever you want about it.
I think it's really interesting just thinking about accreditation. And I know that our friend, Dr. Rozeboom, has a lot of experience going to campuses for accreditation visits. But I'll say the last time we went to the SAC-COC conference, the atmosphere was very different than years prior. So, with these changes, I think, the outcome, there's a lot of positive things that can come out of this. So,
for sure,
I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's a good way to be. The Atlantic has a very inspiring story, which is titled "The Looming College Enrollment Death Spiral." Thanks, Yikes. Atlantic, for your encouragement in this industry. Appreciate ya. So it's a fine article. I wouldn't encourage you to read the whole thing. Here's what I think is interesting that they said, which I've never thought about before, which is American higher education has long consisted of two different markets. One where high-achieving, typically affluent students compete for seats at a national university, and then one where mostly middle and lower income students stay closer to home. So this article is talking about how in the past you had these institutions who were more like local businesses, right? That students would look around and be like, these are the colleges near us, we're going to go there. And then whatever happened in that community kind of stayed there in that community, versus what's happening now, which is especially for top students, there's a national business where you can pick any school you want to, where it's all about rankings. We don't think anything about traveling far away. Matt, you remember when we were in school, Sunday night is when you would call your parents because it was cheaper for long distance. You had to enter your dial code
calling card
on your calling card. Now, like students are talking to their parents all the time. So we've shortened the distance, like they're not as far away from their parents, but also we've made things that happen on a campus much more global. Because it's not just like, oh, we went to this gathering, this thing happened. It's like, we're going to tweet about that and talk about it and that sort of thing. So I do think it's a really interesting idea to think about place-bound students who don't maybe have the luxury of traveling or of getting accepted to the top institutions, what smaller institutions and especially rural institutions are doing is they're expanding access for underrepresented groups. They're adding amenities for students to attract them. They're partnering with private sectors to make sure that they have like online markets and international markets. All of that stuff is going on. And there's this like, we're not in balance anymore. The big institutions are getting more applications and our smaller institutions are not getting as many. So there's a weird, I don't think it's a death spiral, thanks Atlantic, but I do think it's an interesting like rebalancing of how
changing the market for sure. I mean, there's a lot of different forces. And I think you have another article that has now introduced a third market for college degrees, right?
Oh, the speed dating market. Yeah, I will talk about that one. That's a good one. Yeah.
But,
okay. Inside higher ed, love this because Matt, when we are talking about retention intelligence, one of the populations that we always talk about is FTF0, which is first-time freshmen who have transferred in 0 credit hours. At almost every institution we serve, it is a high at-risk group. For a lot of reasons that we can get into, but we've talked before on this show about how important it is to identify that group of students. Well, there's an article out of Inside Higher Ed, which is called 5 Questions on Dual Enrollment. I would recommend that you read this one. It's super helpful. There's a couple of things that I really love about it. One is that sometimes our dual enrollment classes count as a program of privilege, which is interesting, right? Because it could be a surrogate for you have many people in your family who have gone to college. You are in a socioeconomic level where college is not too much for you. You are used to doing AP and dual enrollment. So it could be that it's this program of privilege. And this article is about like, hey, it should not be. It should not just be a program of privilege, nor should it be a process that's like random acts of dual enrollment, which is what they call it, which is like, okay, I guess I'll just take a class. And then you get into college and none of them count, none of them transfer. They are all electives. What I love, this article says, the consequences of not building a cohesive dual enrollment program is that you miss an opportunity of those courses being able to transform students by showing them, number one, they can do college, and number two, that it connects to what they're interested in. I think it's such a good description of why that's an at-risk population, right?
Yeah. Well, where I was thinking, Rachel, is it actually goes back to the article you just talked about in that, I mean, so we talk to our schools a lot about this and how they should be very thoughtful with dual enrollment, how it can create a bridge, and it actually, you're able to connect with the local market in a way that keeps them here, right? And so because they have that exposure, they actually start connecting with your faculty and realizing this is a place where, all of those things, like this is a place where I can be successful. This is a place where I belong and I like my faculty here. It's not as scary as going across, country. And so
I mean, I will tell you that, we're in a town with 3 colleges and universities. And I think it is so interesting. My daughter, who's 14, when I'm like, where would you like to go to college? She's like, our local school. And I'm like, why? And she's like, because I know people there. I know the campus. Like, I know there's something for her about being able to picture that. Whereas in other campuses, she can't picture it because she's never been there. So thinking about using those dual enrollments to get your students on campus, to get them to meet people and really like being able to future visualize themselves there, I think is so important. So that's a great article that just goes through like, be intentional with those programs.
Yeah, huge opportunity, from a strategic minded institution. How can we leverage this? What really is an asset? We're here. We can build these partnerships.
Can you hear that? Do you hear that?
Here they come. That's not a bird hitting your window.
That's not a bird. That's the wind.
That's the window.
Okay, you guys, I'm really sorry. You're just going to have to bear with me. There's nothing I can do about it. Making my cheeks pink. Sorry. Okay. Let's move on to AI. So I have 3 things around AI that I want to talk about. First of all, Gen Z is growing more negative towards AI. So they're like, I really love this quote. It says, anger, nearly 1/3 of survey respondents, 31%, says AI makes them feel angry, which is up 9 percentage points from last year. And only 22% of Gen Z says technology makes them feel excited, down from 36 the previous year. So I really love this because it's like, Matt, like in our jobs, we have the choice to adapt AI to like, how can this make our job easier? Let's try it out for these projects. What I think is so interesting about students is that they are not fully in control of how they use AI, right? Like every institution has a different rule. Teachers have different ways of thinking about it. In K-12, it's the same thing. And I really like that these people are like, hey, I'm not sure that I love this idea of AI. And this article really underlines the fact that they feel like it makes learning harder for them. They feel like they're not absorbing as much information as they should be.
Yeah, when you just drop your essay prompt and you're not,
Yeah.
you're not really challenged. I think what's interesting is, with a lot of things, what they're finding out is what made it easier for them with their, courses and their classwork is what makes it easier for an employer to not look, hire a recent grad. So it is interesting. My son is a senior graduating in May, and it's just been really interesting, great conversation. Of course, he's, computer science and engineering, and those are, computer science side definitely has been affected by AI. For him, he's able to combine the two, and so he's doing okay. But he has a lot of friends who, they're starting to realize this isn't all just great. It's actually, it's for them, it's a threat to their career. So I could understand.
It's so interesting, like where you are in that trajectory, because you think about like your youngest daughter and my daughter, like they're going to come into high school and then college where those two institutions have had some time to think about, to work out the kinks and say like, here's what should happen, right? But for your son, like he's already into his major and then these changes are coming about. So it's really interesting to think about where you are in that stream, right?
Well, you just think about how far it's come just in the last 3 years, and think in 5 years or 4.5, where it's going to be when our daughters are going to college. So
yeah, for sure. Related, there's an article in the Washington Post about computer science majors are disappearing. And the question is whether AI is to blame. Basically, this comes out of the National Student Clearinghouse, which looks at 97% of US universities. Student enrollment in computer science degrees at four-year colleges fell 8.1% in the fall of 2025. In absolute numbers, it's the biggest one drop of any major discipline going back to at least 2020. In a single year, computer science fell from the fourth largest undergraduate major to sixth. So these researchers are like, what the heck is going on? Is this all about AI? They then did a little bit of research and they've decided that in some cases, students who normally would pick computer science have actually moved to interdisciplinary majors around data analytics and data science. The number increased to 35,000 students in that major in the fall of 2025, up from a few hundred who were taking those majors in 2020, right? So they're like, oh, okay, get me out of this. We've got to try something new. And also related, they are talking about this 8% decline in computer science majors last fall was nearly mirrored by a 7.3% increase in engineering majors, specifically mechanical and electrical engineering. Those enrollments increased by the largest absolute amounts, a jump of 11% and 14% respectively. So it's interesting, just as you're talking about, like, here's the conversation I'm having with my son. There are some people midstream who are like, okay, I've got to pivot. I'm going to think of something else because I'm nervous about computer science. But also, I mean, investing in engineering makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the conversation I had with my son, and where he's really glad that he has his minor in engineering, and he's definitely been able to use that. And it's like, it's going to be a while before we trust AI to to actually design things that are critical.
Yeah, I mean, AI told me that it was 10 hours from Texas to California. Liars. They're liars. Yeah. So let's not have them on bridges.
It's got to get a lot
for sure. Okay, our last thing in AI is about this summit between ASU and GSV. It was in San Diego on April 14th. What I really like about this is they're talking about how there's no silver bullet, that AI does not fix everything. And that if you're not leading with strategy, you're going to end up with a bunch of stuff and you're like, I don't know why we have this, right? So Matt, I was thinking about a program is not a plan. Like, oh, we have an AI program. Okay, great. What is your plan with that? Well, we don't know. Everybody's right. So that's not strategic thinking, right? Not to mention the fact that there's all of these questions about student data, about what's appropriate, how you share information, what happens to that data. There's just a lot going on there. But one of the things I wanted to highlight from this article is that they're saying, like, there's all of these companies all of a sudden who are like chatbots, and you can have a chatbot do tutoring and they can do all these things for your students. And what the research is showing, which we've talked about before, is if you are the kind of person who is going to take advantage of tutoring, you're probably doing that already, right? You're not the most at-risk student. You're the student who's trying to move from a B to an A. You've learned how to do this thing. And so that's great. We want for you to be able to get tutoring, but it doesn't solve the problem of people on campus who are able to identify students who are struggling and then connect with them. All of the research is saying AI is a good stopgap measure if you don't have connections, relationships, guidance, mentoring, advising. Fine. We would rather have something than nothing, but there is no replacement for friendships, community, and all of those connections that we see. So I'm not surprised by that, but I like when they do the research about it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I don't know if you saw Landon Gray's post on LinkedIn. Landon, a friend of ours, former colleague, and he just posted on LinkedIn. He used basically built his own little chatbot, and because he wanted to be able to just speak to it rather than type, and for it to capture his ideas and then ask him questions and kind of help him probe his thoughts. And so he was showing it to a friend, and his friend was like, it looks like, yeah, you could definitely use that for like therapy. And he's like, no, you need a therapist for therapy.
Hey, that's so funny that you say that, because one of the things they say in this article is that they are using chatbots to train counselors, like, so not for clients, but counselors are responding to, like, okay, use Carl Rogers' theory and respond to these students. And so then their supervisors are looking at their responses and being like, that was great. Or here was an opportunity for you to sit in that feeling a little bit longer. Or here was an opportunity to ask this question, which I love that. I think that's a great application of it, right? Not for the client, but for your counselor. So love that.
Yeah.
All right. Lastly, this one is crazy town. I don't even know what to say about it, but there's another Washington Post article that says adults are earning college degrees online in weeks,
in weeks. Start,
finish
in weeks.
In weeks. So this starts with Christy Williams, who is a human resource executive. She spent 2 months getting credits and then raced through 11 online classes in 4 weeks. Later that year, she went back to earn her master's in 5 weeks. And the total cost of those 2 degrees was just over $4,000. Okay, well, we should be talking about that in higher education. Also, she now is a consultant to tell you how to do this. She's like, you can buy my book and pay money for me to show you how to do this. But this article is full of people who are like, okay, Western Governors does a unlimited, what am I trying to say? Like in an 8-term semester, which is how they do it, you can take unlimited classes for the same amount of money, which is something crazy like $1,100 for as many classes as you want over 8
tuition. Yeah.
Block tuition. So, and their master's is like $2,000 for that 8 weeks. So you have all of these students who are like, I paid $20 for my degree. You can imagine people who went, for example, to Western Governors are like, you are cheapening our degree for everyone. Like, I'm a traditional on campus, took me 4 years to graduate. the comparison to your degree to mine is not favorable for me, right? People are going to start to question it. So that's crazy.
And so I think, you had said they actually created a splinter group on Reddit. So
in Reddit, yeah.
For accelerators, this as fast as you can. And then those who are like, traditional. And it's just so fascinating to because I mean, to them it's a game, and it's like they're posting their scores, like how quickly can I push through this program? And the bachelor through master's is, I mean, it's crazy how
what I think what they're
doing is they're sharing their tips on how to get through faster. And
I think what's interesting is so many of those students are non-traditional students. And what they're saying is this actually leans on my experience. So like one of the reasons I can do this so quickly is because I have some experience in this. But Matt, I went on that subreddit and here's what somebody said who finished, I think they finished in like 6 weeks. They got their undergraduate degree in 6 weeks. Here's what they said. You might be worried you won't retain any information from the courses, and you're right. Yeah. However, the things you do retain will be the foundational parts you need for your first few jobs, and the rest you will relearn or refresh while actually on the job. The goal is to learn how to learn this kind of stuff. You can learn it later, just not while you have school to do. Shoot, let's talk about value proposition, shall we? I mean, I whatever. I got a lot to say about that.
I can't wait for Rozeboom's thoughts on this. You're gonna have to add.
Yeah, this is so helpful, right? Because our guests don't know our State of the Union. So a lot of times they come on and they're like, what the heck is that about? I'm like, the State of the Union is crazy. Okay, Matt, I want you to stay on. I'm going to welcome Dave to the show.
All right.
Oh, I didn't say it. And that's the State of the Union. That's the State of the Union.
That is the State of the Union.
Dave, can someone go to Mars Hill and complete their degree in 6 weeks?
Not yet, but it's funny you even bring that up because the other day we were talking about a 3-year degree instead of a 4-year degree. So I think a lot of the market's going to move to make it faster. And my daughter, she's getting hers in 2. So because she came in with all the credits.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I was reading that kind of as a juxtaposition of this like 8 weeks to graduate versus why is it 4 years? Like, that's an arbitrary thing. Can we make it less? And I was just talking to one of my friends who was has a lot to do with seminaries. And he was saying when he got his degree, it was like 96 hours. And now seminaries are in a race to decrease the number, right? Because it's just a made up number. So it's like the seminary he went to was 96 hours and now it's something like 70. And I'm like, well, what did they get rid of? And he's like, I don't know. I guess there was stuff to cut, like fat to cut in that. So it's pretty crazy. Anyway, I think we should talk about value, the value proposition of institutions. Yeah. Okay. Well, Matt, I just wanted you to be able to say hi to Dave. They're friends.
There, Matt.
It's good to see you.
It's great to see you guys.
Okay, Matt. Thanks for joining. All right, Dave, let me give you a real introduction and then we will dive in. So you serve as Vice President for Student Life and Facilities at Mars Hill in North Carolina. Do students affectionately call you Dr. Boom? They still do that?
Yeah, quite a few do. Yeah.
Okay. That's a good, I mean, it's nice to have a last name that you can shorten like that to something powerful. You have 23 years of experience in higher education, leading student affair divisions at Mars Hill and Hardin-Simmons. But if I gave you the list of all of the places you've been involved in student affairs, we have St. Edward's, Baylor, Ashland, Calvin. Just what I appreciate about you is you have so much experience in so many different organizations. You are so good at building partnerships with academic affairs, and you bring this unique blend of administrative leadership, crisis response expertise, and a passion for student development that comes out of your early days as a high school math teacher and now into leading classes for leadership and student services at the graduate and doctorate levels. You're also a consultant for us and for Credo and for the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commissions on Colleges, which is accreditation. What do you think about accreditation? Can we just start with that? I know that's not like a scheduled conversation, but what do you think about it?
What's so fun is as you're doing your State of the Union, I'm thinking, wow, that'd be a great topic. Wow, that'd be a great topic. Yeah, I actually just did a SAC COC visit to another school, and I think it's important to have the peer review piece. I think Matt was the one who said at the last conference there was this, oh, it's very different, and that's because the whole QEP is no longer mandatory. The
That's right.
quality enhancement project or plan.
Yeah, and it's funny how I feel like people respond to that two different ways. Like some of them are very relieved, like, oh gosh,
Yes.
I'm so good. And some of them are just anxious because they're like, well, we don't know what it's going to turn into, but
Right.
like it's the devil, right? Like I would rather
Yeah.
do what I know how to do than be worried about what's going to happen. So,
and the school that I went to actually wanted to do the QEP anyway, even though it's not required, because they're committed to continuous improvement, and that's one way to show it. So
yeah, I love that. Which, I mean, I really appreciate the commitment to being a high quality institution, regardless of what your accreditor recommends or right, what's imperative for them. So I love that.
Well said.
Okay, here's what I want us to talk about today. I have a bee in my bonnet about this division between academics and student development. And I have a lot to say about why it got that way, historical reasons, blah, blah, blah. But I want for us to talk today about this experience that we are having on our campuses where students are confused and not getting the kind of holistic support that they need because we're separating those things out and being like, oh no, that's an academics problem. Oh no, that's a student development problem. So can we just dive into that and leverage some of your expertise? So you have been to many institutions. I'm curious what you think are the biggest gaps right now between what campuses intend to deliver in terms of this holistic student support and what students are actually experiencing day to day.
That's a great question. And I think I even failed to tell you ahead of time that my colleagues up in West Virginia Wesleyan, the provost and the vice president for student affairs they're leading the development of a book that's going to come out next year. And the provost here, who will be our president come June, and I are writing a chapter in that book on this very topic. So I didn't even tell you that. But I think that, yeah, it should be fun. Hopefully it's helpful to people. But I think there definitely is a gap. And a lot of times it boils down to communication and priorities. I think a lot of schools like Mars Hill and our size are in survive and advance mode, trying to keep the pieces together. Yeah. And, especially with the loss of different financial supports like grants. And for us specifically, we lost 7 people out of 8 that had to do with student success. And so we have a champion in Lisa Walkman who's just phenomenal, but we lost 7 people who were doing the work to help students, belong and have success. Yeah. And so I think the biggest gap has to do with isolation over integration. So in other words, you hear sometimes people say, well, stay in your lane kind of thing. And the small school in particular, we can't do that.
We don't have lanes. We don't have enough
right.
people.
That's exactly right. So when people don't know about each other's areas, they can perceive it's a certain way. There can be fear, and so if there isn't an intentionality on integration, around whether it's first year experience or you can name a lot of things that cross over. Yeah, you're going to struggle.
It's such an interesting idea. I was thinking about with the student at the center, you think about, right, like their advisor knows that they're really struggling in classes. So they're like, you should maybe only take 10 hours, 12 hours. And then financial aid is like, no, you shouldn't do that because it's going to affect your financial aid. And then Res Life is like, well, if you're only taking this, you can't. Like, it's just so interesting to walk around that circle and be like, here's what everyone is interested in. But if it's not cohesive, you're not serving the student well, right? So
can I just one word about that real quick? Please. And that is, you said earlier, if things aren't strategic, then you're just doing the thing. I think it had to do with AI, but this is true here too. If there isn't a strategy, then it is just ad hoc, helping people.
Yeah.
As you see fit.
It's very reactive, right? Like, oh, okay, we should do this thing instead of being like, hey, we have a plan. So it leads into this idea of what do you think students, like when you are thinking about students at an institution where those two things are very separated, what is that cost them in terms, like real terms, not just like, oh, well, it's harder, but like in real terms, what does it cost a student?
Well, some of them don't actually graduate, or I think it costs some students for their life because if they don't finish college and they don't learn some of the soft skills, or they get it done in 6 weeks and didn't really learn anything. um, Sorry, I just had to say that. Then I think it hampers them for the rest of their life. They're trying to like learn some skills that they would get in college, and they may not get otherwise. I'm not saying someone can't learn the skills outside of college, but college is it's about student development, right? And figuring out calling and purpose. And so, boy, if you're not getting the support you need to be successful, and then you decide college isn't for me, you miss out on all kinds of opportunity.
It's so interesting because I really love the student development part of higher education, because student development, we get 18-year-olds, and by the time they graduate, we should have walked through this path with them where we develop them in all of the ways, like how to be a good friend, how to be in community, how to learn things, right? All of those elements are so important. And so I think it comes down to that value proposition of like, if it's just pass the test, then do it in 6 weeks. Okay. Right. But what we want to do at our institutions is say, this is a whole journey with people around you. And we have to deliver on that. Otherwise we're not doing
exactly
it very
right.
Yeah. Okay. So my question says, you've led in turbulent years, which that's an understatement. Like, we've had a lot of turbulence, right, in the last 10 years, much less before that. Are there any patterns in sort of crisis response and retention challenges that you've noticed just continue to repeat over and over?
Absolutely. Well, I'm just thinking H1N1, Katrina, Rita, Helene here, George Floyd, lots of different things. And what I've seen from a student affairs perspective is we need people who are willing to run to the fire, so to speak. That a lot of people in student affairs, they're in the business, if you will, to serve and to see students to the finish line. And so it becomes very apparent in crisis who is willing to do the things necessary to make sure the students are found, belong, connected. All the Ferris philosophy of identify, solve, and connect, and succeed. Well, that comes through in crisis more than anything.
Yeah, for sure. Get ready. Oh, can you hear that? You can't hear that?
No, I see a truck going by outside my window.
Okay. All right. If you can't hear it, it's fine. I'm like kind of terrified because anyway, it doesn't matter. Yes, you're exactly right. Like, who runs to the issue is really.
Yeah, and what kind of attitude do they have too? I mean, we know, resource, the promise triangle that Matt Boisvert talks about is that the institution, basically resources faculty and staff to deliver on a promise that it makes to students. Well, when the institution isn't providing the kind of resources that are necessary, faculty and staff are a lot of times stretched, for lack of a better word, to deliver on said promise to the student. And so that's a real piece of having the right attitude can certainly help, but it only goes so far.
Yeah, you for sure have to resource that. And I think for so many of us, dedication to the mission and the vision. I don't know if I've told you this story before, Dave, but I was talking to somebody once where he got hired as an RD for an institution, and he got there, he moved his family there, and then it was like way less than he thought. They were like, oh no, part of your salary is you get housing, so we're taking that out of the number we gave you. Like, it just was way less money. And he was about to have to go on food stamps. And so he went to the president and he was like, hey, I want to be a good RA. I want to help your students, but I don't have enough money to support my family. And is there anything you do? And the president said, oh, person, we don't spend money here. We spend people.
Are you kidding me?
No. And I was like, you should be so happy he said the quiet part out loud, because now you know.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy because that guy quit. He was like, okay, I quit. And then he moved somewhere. Because as soon as you understand that your institution is banking on using you up, sending you away and finding another person, you cannot work there anymore.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, how we resource people is as important as that commitment to student success, I think. And it's a hardship in our industry for sure. All right, let's talk about, you went from a high school math teacher to VP for Student Life and Facilities. I want to know, like, what happened? How did that happen, Dave? Give me the lowdown.
Well, I don't want to bore people with the whole journey, but I actually was a residence hall director at 2 institutions before teaching high school math.
Oh.
And so, and coaching a bunch of sports, because that was my undergrad, and I didn't want to wonder later in life, well, what would it have been like to teach high school? And I actually turned down a director of Res Life position to teach high school, which is, looking back on it, I'm like, why did I do that? But I learned a lot from that experience and realized, no, my calling was for education, but in higher education, not secondary. I still love sports and I still love, coaching, et cetera, but I don't miss teaching math.
Oh my gosh.
So, honestly, I think it's been a natural, pretty much progression along the way in terms of my career. A student affairs person who starts out in Res Life, does some things in student activities. And then, I got facilities kind of comes along with a lot of it, especially if you're talking about the student experience. And then I've taught all along the way. So that has been wonderful, informing me of the student experience in the classroom. And a lot of times they talk about what's outside the classroom too, which then helps to bridge the gap between academic affairs and student affairs.
Yeah. It's really interesting you say that, because I was just talking to a school where they have administration at very high level, but they came from business. So they've never been faculty. They were never provost. They came from business. And now they're the dean of a school and they're teaching a class. And they're like, hey guys, this is hard. And everyone's like, yeah. And they're like, I just had no idea. Like, I thought we were going to like come into a class and we're all going to like talk about things and whatever. And he's like, the stuff going on in my student's life, I would have had no idea that faculty are dealing with all the time, that student affairs people are dealing with all the time. It's such a great example of like, when you do the work, when you move your chair, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. Oh, I understand now why we're having such a hardship here, right? It's just so important to have both those pieces tied in together.
Yep.
So what is the advantage, you think, of having been in the classroom and also had all of these years of student development?
Well, I think the advantage is seeing the holistic student experience. I know there are a lot of staff that teach, and so at least on our campus and other campuses that actually get that window into the academic piece. And then there are a number of faculty who are invested in the co-curricular piece beyond their classroom. And I would call them the stars on our campus. It's Carrie Hunt, and who's health and human performance. And then there's Brett Johnson in sociology. These are faculty members who are completely engaged outside the classroom. But what I think creates the isolation sometimes are staff that don't understand the teaching, the academic side, or faculty that come to teach and then leave and think that's it. That's all there is you're here to get a degree, and I don't really care about your sport or what actually brought you here. I think there's a disconnect there sometimes. So being on both sides, you can try to see where their points of integration are needed more than anything.
Yeah, it's really interesting as you're saying that, because I'm thinking about the separation between some of our schools and like R1 schools, right? Where you really do have two different kinds of people. You have researchers who have to teach, but really are there to do research. And then you have like student affairs and student development people who are like, okay, how can we help the student be successful? But at our institutions, those people should be very similar. You might define your job as you have to teach biology, but you also have a bunch of students that you should be paying attention to. And then so often we tap into our staff members to teach because they're similar people to what who we want to be engaged with our students, right?
Yeah. I mean, to say that, we're all educators, right? And I think maybe that strikes some people wrong way when a staff person says they're an educator, but it is about learning, right? And the research about, well, every student that knows 4 faculty members they retain at a higher rate. There's research around that. Well, when they actually looked into it further, they defined faculty as, well, faculty or staff that's having an impact on the student.
And David, it's so funny to me because I can't tell you how many people I talk to not in higher education who, when I'm trying to explain like early alert and what we do, they're always like, oh, faculty. And I'm like, yes, for sure. Faculty help us identify those students, but you know that there are a whole bunch of other people that work at the institution too, right? Like it's not just faculty that work there. There's a lot of other people that we have to take into account when we're thinking about student work. I was talking to, do you know Dr. Ferreira from Anderson University?
Yeah.
Yep. He was saying the other day in this idea of we're all educators, he's like, our job is to create productive citizens. And when you think about a productive citizen, you don't just think about, do they know the book knowledge? Like but also all of these other things that they should be learning in college, which I really love. Okay.
That's well said.
So do you think this isolation, if we're thinking about like the organizational structure of these two pieces, do you think that comes out of just like historical context? We just don't think about it. Do you think it's a cultural issue? Is it something about how we define different jobs? Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it probably comes from all of those in some different form or fashion. So I think about Bowman and Deal a lot, and how leaders should be thinking through all 4 frames. And one of the frames is structural. Where do you position offices? And we just built a new campus center, and we don't have a completely one-stop shop, but just the location of offices that are serving students with faculty coming in and out of the building provides the kind of synergies that, as a third space, helps students stay. So, and are not as isolated, right? So I think structure sometimes, in particular, student success, where does it report? Does it report to academic affairs, student affairs? What about a career? Is that in advancement or student life? Some of those things matter more than others. We like to talk about student success lives on the bridge. And while, it used to be here within academic affairs and now it's in student life, it doesn't really matter. I mean, structurally, if it's bridging the gap, if you will, between those different areas. Culturally, I think that's a big piece too, especially if it's been a certain way at an institution for a long time. Then the isolation, unless there's an intentional breaking down of the barriers, I think a lot of the barriers just naturally exist. People are doing different things, they operate differently.
Their focus is on something different. I was just reading something about how, isomorphism. So this idea that like Harvard is built the way it's built for its students 100 years ago. And then you have smaller schools that in order to gain legitimacy, they don't consider their student population. They just say, we want to be like Harvard. So we're going to take that structure and we're going to put it on our campus. And you're like, but why? You are not serving the same students, not only that Harvard's serving now, but 100 years ago, you're not serving the same students, right? So the inability to be like, do what makes sense for you, that you have this challenge of like, we want people to think we're impressive. And it's like, well, if you don't serve your students well, you're not impressive, right?
Specific examples how that's been done here to try to imitate another school that we are not anything like. So you were right on the money.
Yeah, for sure. Also, Dave, it's funny as you're talking about the frames, I was thinking about in counseling, we do structural counseling, which is like where you literally would say to a family, okay, I want you to like arrange people in this room in the family so that we can understand relationships, right? So like the mom and the dad stand next to each other. And then you always have the youngest do this because they will tell the truth. So they'll be like, oh yeah, mom and dad are here. And then the middle kid is like way over there, like whatever the structure is of the family. It would be so fun to do that on a campus, wouldn't it? Like okay, we're going to pick somebody and then they're going to say like, here's where student affairs are. Here's how all of those pieces work together. Where would you put academics in relation to that? I think it would be such an interesting exercise to be like, let's set it up in the room.
And I wonder what most schools would say about athletics. Because I just ran into a faculty member yesterday who was saying, most faculty don't understand the athletic piece and talk about isolation. That's an arm of the institution that often isn't as well connected as it should be.
And I love the idea structurally of being like, athletics is here. We have faculty who spend a lot of time pointing fingers at athletics, being like, you right. And then you have a lot of administration who are like embracing athletics for a lot of reasons, because it's a driver for admissions, right? Like all of those sorts of things. It would just be so interesting to see. And I don't know how you feel, but like in student development, I loved athletes because they're hard workers. They have really tight schedules. And if they're not doing something they're supposed to, I know who to call. You know what I mean? Like,
totally agree. I think the danger is if, especially with NIL and so on, if they're coming to an institution and the only tribe that they get connected to is that particular, sport or music or what have 100%. You, magnet, and they're not connected to the institution, then you're in danger of actually losing them if they are not seeing the field or have a bad experience or what have you. So I think we have to think about how do we get athletes connected beyond the one particular tribe that they're a part of.
It's so good. We talk about unanchoring, right? That when like an athlete gets cut, they're totally unanchored on your institution campus. And if you have ensured that they have these other connections, then it's not as like free falling as it would be if it was just that one connection. So
I have an example of that. Our student body president, she decided not to play soccer because she was having a bad experience. And she said, I want to stay here, but I've lost my scholarship money. How can I stay here? Because I like the school. And because she was part of SGA. Well, she then became the president and got her connected to a Bonner program. She's working at admissions now. And so she found a way to stay. And I think that's probably more of the rare case than it is the normal way of going.
Yeah, I mean, because part of that question is like, she obviously had enough self-agency to come and say, like, hey, can somebody help me, right?
That's
versus
exactly
somebody who just like goes into the ether and everyone's like, what happened to them? And then we just
that's exactly right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about one of my favorite things and your favorite things, which is Enneagram.
Okay.
Tell everybody what your Enneagram is.
Well, I'm an Enneagram 3 wing 2, so I'm the achiever helper person, and my top Clifton strength is maximizer. So I'm all about, can we make things better? I'm a typology nerd. In fact, for my class this morning with the Masters of Management Leadership, we were working through Working Geniuses by Lencioni, which is a whole nother, the whole point is Warren Bennett says, to be a good leader, know thyself, number one.
Yeah. David, so funny. I'm a 7/8. So
Yes, you are.
Okay. For people who don't know, 7s are like generally positive and everything is going to be fine. Yeah. But with an 8 wing, don't mess with me, which I didn't know I had an 8 wing until one time Matt like gently suggested to me, like, well, you're 8 wing. And I was like, what do you mean?
And he was like, so good.
Nothing. Oh, nothing. And I was like, wait a minute. I think I see what you're talking about.
Brian Dawson's a 7 also.
Is he? That's why the four of us get along so well, right? It's like me and Brian and then you and Matt. We're like, it'll turn out. And you're like, why don't we have a plan for that?
7s are so great with the positivity, but also the high energy. And let's try this and get things started. And got to love that.
But I share that with you to say, it's so interesting as a leader. So the thing that I am always doing is looking for the positive and being like, it's going to be okay. Right. So like I'm cheerleading and I'm always like, well, here's how we're going to make that successful. But to the point of knowing yourself, it is so important sometimes to just be like, yep, that sucks. And, we're just going to sit in that for a minute. And that is not something that comes naturally to me at all. it's something that I've had to be like, and you should hear the voice in my head where I'm like, don't make it better. Don't make it better. Don't say a positive thing. Just be like, yep, this is terrible, right? Do you have any of those things where you're like, I just have to remember that this is something that I have to combat because of the way my brain works?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you study the typologies, the Enneagram in particular, there are blind spots for each of ours, right? And so, like for the type 3, the two most prolific are workaholism, like, just work till you drop, if you will, because you're trying to achieve so much. So, what balances to one person might not be the same balance for a 3. The other is taking, credit for things that I wouldn't necessarily, didn't necessarily do. So I'm very conscious to point out Lisa did this thing, or, Josh or Amber, they did these things, because that actually combats my taking recognition for something that I didn't specifically do.
Yeah. It's just so nice to feel like you have some expertise on yourself. You know what I mean? It's just so nice to be like, I think I know how I would respond to that. Or, oh my gosh, I'm responding exactly the way that I thought I would. I need to like mitigate that a little bit. And
that's right.
So
when the 7 goes to 5, you're in a good place, Rachel, because you focused, and you're doing that right now. So you're doing great.
This is my happy space for sure. Okay. So you talk a lot about leadership and organizational structure. And I want to think about what changes, what happens on a campus when they really commit to recreating the learning environments to make sure that every student feels seen and has what they need. Like, as you think about leadership and organizational structure, what would you expect to see?
What a great question. There's so many things with that one. Partly because I have facilities, I want to just reference Levine's person environment theory that, the student coming in times the environment that we create results in the behavior, their experience here. So our main thing in student life, if you will, but faculty as well, how do we shape the environment for the best experience possible? And when we know, especially from Ferris's research and our work with you all, that it really is about being seen and being included and finding your tribe, and people know you. And so what are we doing to shape the environment so that students are seen and known, and cared for? And I think part of the cared for piece that gets missed sometimes are like the facility things. We're going to probably be changing laundry contract because, that needs to happen for our students' experience to be better, right? We had a bunch of admissions people and student life and some faculty that came together in 2019 and took a residence hall that was like whitewashed walls, no air conditioning, 500 football players, kind of just painting a picture for you here. And we went in and we painted a blue and yellow, those are our colors, stripe down the hallway, just to break up and add some school pride and color to that building. It was a small act. It didn't take us that long. And I think it made a big difference to the environment for those students that were living there.
I love that so much, that facilities reports to you, because it is, if we're going to talk about structure, right, that makes sense that as we're thinking about what students need, we would include our spaces.
That's right.
On campus too.
And I would say if it doesn't report to student life, then there has to be it usually reports to the CFO. So there has to be a strong relationship. And I would say this, to get anything done, the relationship piece really matters, especially if you don't feel like you have a lot of power to do the thing. The relationship is how it actually gets done, right? So, the relationship with the CFO would take care of the facilities things if it's not within student life. Yeah, it could.
It can't be an outlier, right? It has to be integrated into all of those pieces. Yeah. Okay. Well, I still have 3 questions for you, and we're at time, but I'm going to ask them anyway. So, first of all, do you have a specific story or a campus moment that stands out to you as kind of proof about what's possible when you do that student engagement really well?
I don't have a specific story, but I will tell you this, that our care team which a lot of schools have a care team, and those are the team, usually student affairs folk, who work with students behind the scenes to help them get across the finish line, right outside the classroom, and it's connected to the classroom. That team and I will often look at a student walking across the stage and say, wow, that student made it. If not for a team of people, coaches included, that are behind the scenes helping the student make it, I mean, that's what the success story is. And then briefly, I had one student who, when I was working in Ohio, the student graduated, and 10 years later, I was at a whole nother institution, and this student found me and called me and said, I want to know that you and your team made a difference in my life, making it through school 10 years previously. And
look, I just got goosebumps.
We often don't hear those,
right.
Don't hear that. So it's pretty awesome.
That's so good, Dave. There's always this moment, I don't know if you have this, where, when I did career counseling, so I helped a bunch of people choose their majors.
Yes.
And so there's always this moment where, like, this happened to me in the airport the other day, where someone came over and was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but you did career counseling for me. And there's this moment where you're like, did I do a good job or a bad job? Like, are you going to tell me I ruined your life or whatever? Right, and then she was like, so you were so helpful. And I was like, thank God.
Totally.
You just never know. Yeah. So it is really beautiful and I think you and I have talked about this before, just the idea that almost every student can name a person.
That's right.
Every student who is successful can name a person who just decided, you are going to be successful, and I'm just going to walk alongside you in this journey, which I really
which goes to show, when you don't have enough student success personnel, you have to pick and choose generally who you're going to walk alongside, right?
Yeah.
And that makes it really tough.
And it's interesting to say, like, can you calculate how many students each person should be in charge of? Not to assign them, but just to be like, okay, well, we have 500 students and we have this many employees. And so you should be able to identify 3 students every year that you are like, that's my sheep, and I'm just going to walk alongside of them. So I really love that.
I know you got to move real fast, but I will say Lisa and some faculty members have led a group called Coaching the Climb, that they're training on how to coach, and more faculty are stepping into these and taking on a few students to fill the gap of the loss of student success professionals.
I love that so much, because oftentimes I find with faculty that it's not so much that they don't want to, it's that they have no idea how to, right? And people who are on that student affairs side, that tends to come very naturally to us. So it's like very hard to explain how to be with students. You're like, you just pay attention to what, I don't know how to explain it. So I need to talk to Lisa and be like, how are you teaching this? Because it's so important.
She's amazing.
Give them a model. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Here's my last question for you.
Okay.
So if our listeners are a dean or a director or a faculty member, and they are feeling overwhelmed by today's challenges, which is very common. We talk all the time about burnout, about feeling over extended, about how many hats we're wearing, about your example of like people getting cut, especially if you're seeing positive outcomes from the work that they're doing. There's just so many people who are really, really overwhelmed by the challenges. So what is one thing that they could do this week to move towards this ideal of a united and transformed student experience?
Well, the overwhelm piece is very common these days.
Yeah.
And so I would start with that, recognize that that's common, and that your attitude does make a difference. I think the number one thing, if you read The Wisdom of the Bullfrog by Admiral McRaven, he says, number one thing is work ethic. And if you just become the best at your job, the best you can, that translates into a stronger student experience, right? Now, granted, some people are saying, well, I got a million things on my job. Well, then I would say, well, find out from your supervisor what are the most important ones, and prioritize. And then the other thing I would say is find partners, people that can come alongside with you. Maybe they have the capacity in a season to help with a particular thing. Ultimately, if it's not tied to the strategic plan, then I would question, well, why are we doing
it?
why are we doing it?
Yeah, it's a really good point. One of the things that I love about higher education is that we're always willing to try new things, especially on the student affairs side. Like, well, why don't we, right? But I think a thing that we fall down on sometimes is the measurement of that intervention, the outcome, and then being like, yes, that was totally worth our time and our attention. Or, that was a lot of work and we didn't see any results of it. And so, yeah, just going through and being like, okay, well, I have 27 things on my list. Can you and I start cutting these? Like, that's not important. That's not important. That's not important. I think it's
Lisa and I have done that twice in our tenure here together. So
I love Lisa so much because, Dave, it's really nice to work with someone who the problem with them is they want to help everybody all the time.
I know. What a great thing. So,
I love you so much. What we have to work on is how do we get other people to help you? But it's a really nice thing. We have a bunch of people at fairs like that. And Z and I are always laughing about like boundaries. Like it's so nice to work with someone without boundaries. It's not sustainable, right?
Right.
But it for sure is a nice thing to be like, hey, do less. It's okay. Settle down instead of being like, can you work, please?
That's the one direction's a lot harder than the other. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't help but think that this conversation about how we marry these two things together is just going to continue to be more and more important as we enter, as the Atlantic so kindly called it, our death spiral of higher education. I think we're going to have just adaptive leaders who are like, we have to do this really differently than we have done it before. And in leadership, I mean, it's so hard to get people to change midstream and to be like, stop what you're doing. We're going to create a whole new thing. So I really think it's so relevant for what's happening in the world today on our campuses, with our students, with technology. And hopefully this whets everyone's appetite to go out and just see, like, do a structural map of your campus. It would be so interesting to see where those connections are. Any last words for me?
I would just say for the listeners, I would assume many of them utilize Ferris resources, but I mean, people ask me all the time, what's the secret sauce? Because we've had retention go up so high and so fast in a couple places that I've worked. And the secret sauce really is the people, but Ferris and resources is a huge component of that, because you're about the strategy of identify, connect, and solve, and creating a culture of care. Who knows the student and who can come alongside that student to help them progress. So just kudos to you guys.
Thanks, Dave. It's always really nice. I didn't even talk about your increases in retention. I mean, if you talk about a 12% increase on a campus at two schools, that is incredible. And I will say, we love to serve institutions who have leadership like you, who are like, we will fix all of the process things and structure things, and like, we'll fix all of that. Now, if we can just slip technology under that to make it more effective, more efficient, right? Easier for people to do the work. That is the best combination. Because you're right, the people are the most important, but freeing up their time to actually see students is such an important component of that.
Exactly right.
Good job on those increases in retention. That's pretty incredible. Maybe we should.
It is a lot of people that contribute to that, right? So
yeah, for sure. All right, Dave, my friend, always good to spend time with you. I really appreciate, especially at this time of the semester, which is really busy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. We have one more episode this semester before summer, so join us for that. And you guys have a good day.